as I expected would eventually end up happening, with Howard getting in the mix in so many different random things, trying to clean everything up and manipulate this and that, in the same way that Burke was eventually able to put everything together, anyone else that dug deep enough and realized that he had his hands in so many different situations, they might not know exactly what was going on, but it would seem highly suspicious that every time you look at this, you look at that, Howard is somewhere in the mix. And in the same way that Burke was able to figure it out, here you have her dad, who through guilt and whatnot ends up digging a bit deeper. I'm sure that had Howard not intervened and kind of, threw off the girlfriend, she would have figured out that there was something fishy going on there as well. But with the dad now on the trail and digging into things, him going and speaking to Nicole's dad, that alone, because what reason would Howard have to go to speak to him, especially when it then comes out that he's the one that encouraged Nicole's parents to, to file this complaint with the police department, which led to the investigation into Burke, right? And it's just going to be the more that they dig, the more they're going to find that Howard's been involved in these things where, unless he was doing wrong, there would be no reason for him to be involved, right? I am very certain that the whole thing of Scrappy's mom coming into the police station is going to come back into play, right? Because what you're going to have is that just with that little inkling that there's something off there, like we see, Burke's dad, the police chief or captain or whatever he is, and then the guy from the task force, the three of them in a room together, kind of putting stuff together and realizing like something's not adding up here. You already have it where I'm sure they're going to look into Laverne, which is Jukebox. They already have Marvin on their radar, and now they're taking a closer look at Howard. So them digging, I think they might not get to the point of figuring out with Kanan and stuff, or at least they're not there as yet. But, they speak to Peng or whatever it is, or Peng gets any, notice of this. We haven't heard anything about Scrappy's mom being found as yet. But I'm sure with Peng, without having been your informant, she came in to speak to you. She speaks to Howard instead, and you look at it that Howard kind of pushed his way in there to speak to her and sent Peng to go talk to the task force guy. Questions would be asked, because how is it that this woman comes in and then you have it not that long later she pops up dead? Right? There was no real reason for Howard to intervene in that situation, or at least no innocent reason for him to intervene in that situation where Scrappy's mom then pops up dead. Right? And so we see him and RAQ are meeting. But again, it's like, this thing of no honor amongst thieves. This is now at least the third or so time that him and RAQ have met since the task force guy, let drop that they were aware of Marvin, still has not mentioned a word of it to RAQ, right? And now here you have it, another situation where he's going to intervene, where Lou is out here, Lush Lou, the drunk uncle, is out here running amok and causing problems, but yet can't be found. And with the things that he knows and what he's been a part of, him running his mouth and being reckless and whatnot, it's a problem for not only RAQ and Marvin, but also for Howard, because of Howard's involvement with their mess from pretty much last season, right? And so now Howard is once again drawn back into this and trying to flush out Lou. So unfortunately, Jukebox gets pulled in and is questioned, but honestly, Jukebox has nothing to do with any of the street stuff, right? Like, she's not the one to question. She was tied to Nicole, yes. And really, the only reason that these things are linked here is because of Howard and Burke, right? Because otherwise, Nicole and Jukebox's situation would have stayed over there in Manhattan, right? And the reason that there's even any connection between this kind of stuff is Howard. Just making a mess in all of this kind of stuff. Because really, if I'm not mistaken, I think that was more like Burke was digging into his business and he wanted to launch this IAB investigation to kind of move any suspicion from him. And then also to kind of make it where her hands were tied up with this IAB investigation to where she wouldn't be able to continue digging into him and what he had going on. It's like, Kanan is really Howard's son. Because it's like the two of them always into stuff and think they're the smartest ones and they just make a mess of things. Right? And to some degree, RAQ as well. We see here, which in the question that I would ask is, Lou, the lush, is out here drunk at a bar, passing out, waking up, causing a ruckus. And, the owner of the bar, or whoever this guy is, calls it in. 2 police officers come, which I saw from the clip. I thought they were just 2 random police officers. So I was wondering how it was that Lou ended up being in Howard's possession. But as we see here is that it seems like he probably tipped these cops off to, that he's looking for Lou. Another thing, right? Because here it is. They find Lou. They bring Lou to this location where Howard comes and meets them. But I don't think we've ever seen these cops before. But here's like 2 people that you've gotten involved in this thing, right? In addition to the owner of the bar, where, let's say, should something happen to Lou or this or that, whatever, just in the course of the investigation, Lou robbed this liquor store the night before. He's at this bar carrying on. 2 police officers come and they take possession of him, but he never shows up at a police precinct, right? Like, they don't even throw him in the drunk tank or something like that. What happened to him? And then it's like these 2 police officers, they take him to, I don't know what this house is with the plastic sheeting, but they come and they deliver him there and hold him there for Howard. For Howard, I would question, like, what if they tell somebody? Or somebody comes asking them questions. How do you explain this away? This is another messy situation. And in the midst of all of this, we still see, Marvin none the wiser out here turned maybe not his life around, but his character around, trying to do the right thing. You see him here meeting up with Gerald early in the episode. And it's like, them meeting up, he's going out eating breakfast or whatever it is with him and his daughters, Marvin that is. You see Marvin going out, meeting up with Gerald, helping him with his daughters. They're hanging out at the park, hanging out, getting food together and whatnot. And he doesn't drop it to him that, like, listen, the feds are looking at you or anything like that. You actually, last episode, revealed that, you've been digging into Jukebox's background and mob ties and this and that and all this kind of nonsense. You don't tell Marvin that the feds are looking at him. Or even, let's say, if you felt uncomfortable telling him, you don't just, like, break off the friendship or whatever it is. You're still calling him when you need him. And unfortunately, things come to a head when Gerald, who's likely spiraling probably due to the pressure, which is probably why he started using again. You have it where, unfortunately, one of his daughters dies while, as a result of drowning, because he was busy getting high. And it's like the guilt, the remorse, the pressure of that, like, I feel it's unnatural for a parent to lose their child. But to lose that child in part due to your own actions, that's a lot to carry, man. And here again, he calls Marvin. Marvin, being a good friend, comes to support him. He's there at the hospital thinking, maybe something happened to the daughter or whatever it is. He now reveals to Marvin that the feds are looking at him. And they have been for some time. And he's been carrying on this farce of a relationship with Marvin as a means of getting information for the feds. And Marvin is understandably upset about this, because here it is that he thought he was being a friend to this guy. None of Marvin's street dealings ever had anything to do with this guy. Here it is that he's trying to comfort him in his time of need, telling him that he needs to get himself together to get himself into a program. It's unfortunate that you lost the one daughter, but, maybe it's best that your other daughter is taken for the time being so you can focus on getting yourself together. Only for Gerald to reveal at that point that, the feds have been leaning on him for information about Marvin. And it's like, the sense of hurt and betrayal, completely understandable. And Marvin telling Gerald that he's selfish. That everything he's done is about him. That him getting high and focusing on his needs and whatnot while neglecting his daughters. Because this isn't the first time, right? If you remember, he put them in the car outside while he was getting high inside. Now, I was holding out for Gerald after the last episode that either he would just tell Marvin that, the feds were looking at him and he was an informant, or that somehow he would think of some way to kind of make things right with Marvin. And he kind of does here, by shooting up and basically like ODing, he took himself out of there. It's like with that, and it's like really I was curious as to why even the feds were looking at Gerald, because it's like, how much heroin was it that Gerald had when they pulled him in that it was too much to be, explained away as being for personal use? Like, what was his dealing? And then it's like, what information would he have had on Marvin? But either way, he kind of came through for Marvin in the end by like getting himself out of there, because it's like with this, I don't think Gerald would have really had much information. So if they were looking at Marvin, you would have to have info from elsewhere, so it's like his death, you don't really have Marvin as like an inside, as this tied to Marvin. But it's like, aside from that, I don't really see what other evidence you would have. Unless they were trying to use him to connect the dots. But it's like, he didn't know anything about the Italian connection for Marvin. He was never involved in Marvin's street dealing. So it's like, what information could he have gained, or knowledge could he have gained firsthand that he'd be able to pass along to them? It sounds more like they might have made the ties between things and were just going to try to back their way into Gerald knowing the connections between these different situations and Marvin's role in them. Because otherwise it doesn't make sense. And it's like, really, with Gerald's death, they're really grasping at straws when you think of it. Because Gerald doesn't know anything, Jukebox doesn't know anything, but these are the people that you're pulling in. It shows you're on the right track, but you don't really know the path to get to where you're trying to get to. Because it's like, these aren't the people you should be talking to if you want to talk to anybody. And possibly part of that is because if you go to talk to the people that know something about something, they're probably not going to give you any information. Unless you talk to Lou, because he talks to everybody about everything. Marvin was in problems, and possibly still is, unbeknownst to him, at least at this point, like that problem has kind of worked itself out, at least with regards to Gerald. Going back a few episodes where Howard first became aware of the task force looking into Marvin, I found it telling that he's met up with RAQ but hasn't, didn't make any mention of this to her. And so when RAQ meets up with him to basically take possession of Lou, she points it out to him. There's like some tension between them because he's like fussing at her about Lou running his mouth. And she turns around to him and tells him like, you basically been keeping secrets, like you've been playing dirty, because you knew that the task force was looking into Marvin and you didn't say anything about it. And I had a feeling that like Howard and RAQ might turn on each other because they don't really have like a great relationship. For a hot second, they were working together to kind of keep things clean for Kanan's sake. Because even thinking back to it, what was really Howard's reason for telling RAQ about Scrappy? Because at that point, they didn't really have any direct dealings. Scrappy wasn't a threat to Howard as far as I could remember. So it's like, what did he have to gain from telling her? So he kind of put himself in bed with them for no real reason. Because Scrappy snitching and whatnot I guess the concern could have been that maybe Scrappy could have told about Kanan. And so that's why he got himself involved. But it's like here you have it where it's like the two of them are arguing back and forth. And Howard's solution is the feds are onto Marvin to sacrifice him to save everyone else. Because Howard's focus is, number one, self-preservation, but also to protect Kanan. And by virtue of that, to then also protect RAQ. Or at least this plan offers an opportunity to protect the three of them. He doesn't really care about the rest of her family members. But I will say, I stand with RAQ where it's like, no, I'm not gonna, sell my brother out or have my brother go down the river to preserve the rest of us. That's not a thing.
Thanks for tuning in. To ensure you don't miss any episodes, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, go ahead and click the thumbs up button if you like what you saw, and go ahead and share it on social media.